Did you have as much fun doing that as me?
I was jamming to it. I went waltzing down the hallway.
No State Solution by the Free Radicals. It's the KPFT Open Journal Song of the Day, especially chosen for you by our friend and friend of the show, Tanny Lowe.
All right, thanks, Tanny. And if you would like to be someone nominating a Houston-centric or somehow extrapolated Houston-centric song to be the KPFT Song of the Day, just drop us a line to openjournal@kpft.org. You can drop just about anything into the kpft.org site. But Open Journal at KPFT directly comes to all the production team for the Open Journal show. That is the show you're listening to right now, 8 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday. A true local, independent, community-based public radio station. This program produced by the people for the people, now 100,000 broadcast watts of strength, flexing our muscles up and down the Texas Gulf Coast, in front of and behind the pine curtain, augmented by the little booster signal right there in the heart of Huntsville at 91.9 FM. Yes, for those of you behind the pine curtain and behind the walls, good morning. And those of you down on the island of Galveston, on the other side of the fringe, on and off the island at 89.5 FM from the seawall to downtown. Hello down there along the coast. And we welcome all of you tuning in through kpft.org. The multiplicity of streaming options are myriad. And we welcome you to Open Journal. I'm Dwayne Bradley.
And I'm Marlo Blue. We've been doing a lot of light and frothy kind of things lately on KPFT's Open Journal.
You mean like having Chef Pedro from El Maison come on and make breakfast for us live on the air?
Yes.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that Andy was going to do that today, but no.
He can be Chef Andy too. But we're going to talk about something very serious and very important right now. To keep and bear arms is a protected right guaranteed for the people by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. With gun violence and mass shootings at the top of the news, we're taking a look at the ongoing unnamed war right here in America, the small arms race. Joining us today is Andrew Smolski, whose work focuses on rebellion and imperialism. He's a doctoral student at North Carolina State University and contributor to the radical independent magazine and daily Counterpunch. I do know how to say that.
Counterpunch.
Thank you. Whose article on small arms abolition will be out in January. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Oh, always excited to be here. Thank y'all so much, Marlo and Dwayne.
Let me just say Counterpunch a couple of more times because it is important. If you are not hip to this magazine, you really do need to read it. It's amazing. Some of the insights that you hear, some of the contributors that you hear on Democracy Now! And on some of your more favorite shows, well, they all contribute to Counterpunch. So we're very fortunate to have Andy here today. Andy, let's discuss this whole thing. Let's lay it out. How does thinking about the Second Amendment in terms of the arms trade change the parameters of the debate?
Typically, we think of the Second Amendment in two forms. One is what they call the liberal argument, which is you as an individual have a right to own a gun for self-defense. The other one is what they call civic republicanism. So you as an individual have a right to own a gun because you can form a part of a militia, you can protect the nation, and or you can fight a tyrannical government. However, when we think about it in terms of the small arms trade, we start to recognize that the production of guns is to make profit. And it's to make profit not just nationally, but internationally. We don't just sell guns here, but we sell guns to conflict zones. We sell guns to tyrannical regimes, dictatorships, military juntas. And so gun proliferation is not just a matter of this liberal individual ownership or this civic republicanism, but a matter of how the United States government and other governments are able to capitalize on the arms trade to maintain their own networks of power, geopolitical power. So I think by moving the debate away from these typical strict parameters of whether it's gun control or gun proliferation to one about whether it's gun imperialism or a way forward towards peace, it allows us a space to breathe, especially in the United States where we don't have that in terms of this argument. Everybody went through Christmas recently. Somebody probably had this very argument at the dinner table with no space to breathe, with no different parameters to be set for that argument.
I was surprised at how many people I saw with open carry guns this Christmas season. I have to tell you that it was not a surprise. It was shocking and scary to me. In locations where people, if they had decided to go ahead and start shooting, there would have been no protection for other people. None whatsoever. Let me ask you, how important is the selling of arms? I mean, as part of our national, the amount of money that we make right here in the national
percentage of the economy.
Yeah. How important is that? And do arms manufacturers are they important to the military-industrial complex, or are these two separate issues?
Well, so in terms of small arms specifically, which the international definition of small arms includes revolvers, self-loading pistols, rifles, carbines, submachine guns, assault rifles, and light machine guns, which gives you a pretty big variance of what is considered a small arm. In terms of the overall economy, I mean, it might not be that big. We have about $500 million plus per year generated from the small arms trade. That's nationally and internationally. But what it is it's about a mindset that it produces along with that profit. And then also how it's connected into the larger military-industrial complex.
Expand on that a little.
For instance, we have the Merida Initiative with Mexico.
Right.
We send Mexico guns, military equipment, and training. Part of that military equipment is these small arms that we're discussing. Those small arms get in the hands of the military and the police in Mexico. They're notoriously corrupt. So that means that these small arms are then leaked to these paramilitarized cartels and other forces within Mexico. This means an increase in human rights abuses across the board. So when we think about what this profit means for somebody in another country, it might be a drop in the bucket economically here, but this is, 120,000 plus deaths utilizing 85% of the guns coming from the United States. So that's the way we have to begin to think about what that would mean economically in terms of each life, right? And then also morally, what does that mean in terms of each life? Because the small arms trade is not just a matter of, as I was pointing out, you getting to own a gun, but where do those guns go when producers want to make a profit? And then who are they lobbying in order to make those deals? Like the Merida Initiative is not just the U.S. government making that initiative. That's arms manufacturers, whether they're small arms or, tanks, military trainers, private mercenary forces, them lobbying the government in order to make sure that those contracts keep coming in. Because the lifeblood of most defense contractors and most small arms are government contracts. Same for police forces here in the United States. For a small arms manufacturer, the 53 largest police forces in the United States, $300,000 plus per year, each of those departments. You want them armed. You want them very well armed. And what does that mean for us as citizens?
Terrifying.
What's the lifespan of these arms, and how often are we having to reboot and continuing to purchase them, and what happens to the now outmoded models? In
2003, we were producing 8 million new arms worldwide a year. There was already 639 million small arms. Some of those small arms have a very long shelf life. Kalashnikovs, AK-47s, being the most famous, extremely long shelf life, extremely well built. Post-Soviet collapse, they dispersed everywhere. So you think they have a long shelf life and they're being produced more and more and more. And that's part of the issue. Think of the United States. Technically, we have a long-term trend of decline for gun ownership per household. We're now at 32% of households possess at least one weapon. However, gun sales are breaking records. So less people are owning guns per household, but yet more people are purchasing them. So that means that one person on average, because there's about 330 million guns in the United States, around there roughly, approximately, yeah. That means that at least all of those households have 3 guns. Some people probably have a lot more, 9 to 10. And who are these people that possess the weapons? And then are these, my questions always comes back as rebellion and imperialism. Is it the oppressed that have the guns, or is it the oppressor typically? And so long shelf life, tons of these things, and the oppressor typically is the person that possesses it. Very serious questions then come into a matter of our safety and the ability of normal everyday citizens to protect themselves against what Marla pointed out, which is the proliferation of open carry.
Bring imperialism into this.
So, going to another example, the 3 main people that purchase small arms from the United States are Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Egypt. Saudi Arabia. Very simple, clear example to most Americans, not the United States government. To most Americans, this is a highly repressive regime that does not permit dissent in any form. So they're number one purchasers, not number one, I think Israel's number one, if I remember correctly. But of the top 3, purchasing weapons in order to quell dissent within their own country, and then, as we learned during the Arab Spring, also in Bahrain, also enabling the crushing of dissent in Yemen. So them purchasing these weapons is being able to stop any kind of change in the regimes within the Middle East, especially the most repressive. Egypt, once again, we now have a military dictatorship under al-Sisi, despite, whatever sham elections you might want to think happened. Purchasing weapons, what did they do? Quell dissent. What they do, they outlawed the opposition parties. Despite what people may think about Islamist parties, you have a legal right to participate in elections. In the United States, we even have far-right neo-Nazi parties that technically can participate. They don't win, but they're allowed to participate because we don't quell dissent. We argue it out and we stop you in terms of our ideas. Well, at least that's the hope.
Theory.
Yeah, theoretically. Israel, massive human rights abuser in terms of the occupation of Palestine. So them purchasing all of these weapons, normal everyday small arms, assault rifles, when you go to a border checkpoint in Israel in order to cross from Palestine, occupied Palestine into Israel, what's the soldier holding? AR-15?
An American weapon.
Yeah, M16 probably, that they're holding. Okay, well that right there is all about U.S. imperialism. What are those countries? They're what we call client states. They do the bidding of the United States government. So our small arms producers, in conjunction with the United States government, enable the continuation of these client states and their repressive policies. And that's where I think the parameters should be set. As a U.S. citizen, what is my government in conjunction with the private sector doing with my taxpayer dollar, with my diplomacy? You know, is diplomacy for peace, or is it to continue this geopolitical war that benefits no normal person?
So you're mentioning the arms industry, the economic impact, and on Democracy Now! Just this morning, and I didn't write down the specific number of dollars, but significant billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of contracts and straight up arms sales. Getting off, I guess, the small arms aspect of it, but it's just total sales. The three largest sales from America this past year were Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and South Korea.
And let's put it in context. What are each of those client states?
Exactly.
And you think, getting to this point of the larger arms trade that you brought up, Dwayne, that's when we get to real big money. I mean, we're talking $100 billion in the large arms trade, including tanks, jet fighters. Saudi Arabia likes to purchase, F-16s from us. Why? Who do they really have to fight? Right? And then this is the real question. Who do they have to fight? Or South Korea? Are they really fighting North Korea, or is this stalemate? And you have this, brutal regime, of course. But everybody forgets that during the Korean War, we bombed their dams purposely to destroy their food source. Which, when you destroy a food source, what gets to come in normally? Well, a dictator that tells them everything's going to be okay, just let me make the decisions, I'll ration properly, and then is able to instill an ideology that rots the society at the core. But that doesn't make the other side some good state of any kind. Why are they purchasing all these arms? Their own populations as well are upset, right, as these neoliberal policies get enacted. So you better have the ability to stage urban warfare against your own citizens, kettle them. If they're going to protest, be able to kettle them properly, get defensive technologies like the sound.
That sonic blaster, yeah.
Oh, Andy Smolski, I'm so glad you're here to explain all this to me, because there are things that I remember and things that I guess I just push out of my mind. So I'm glad that you're here to remind us all this. Who controls the small arms trade?
Major companies, at least in the United States, or let's take the big picture since we were on global arms trade in general. Mm-hmm. The UN Security Council has 5 permanent members. 3 of those permanent members, the United States, China, and Russia, are the major exporters of arms. Now, they're not always, well, the United States is always number one, period, the end. It is a munitions depot pariah on the world stage, right? China and Russia, they vie for the top 3 spots, but every now and then they lose out to South Korea. They'll lose out to Brazil every now and then. So other countries take those spots. But what's the job of the UN Security Council? Well, it's to make sure that the world has peace, right? I mean, that's the whole point. But yet they have a profit motive to make sure that conflict is the norm. I don't know how many of the listeners are involved in anti-capitalist politics, but what we usually say is capitalism produces an inherent contradiction. Because of the profit motive, what we see for an arms trade group is not a discussion of the arms necessary for security, but rather arms necessary for profit. So the more they proliferate, the more money that comes in. That's the military-industrial complex's inherent contradiction. It's not what Eisenhower said. Eisenhower was discussing it more in terms of how it was going to rot out the core of the nation. But why it does that is because once that accumulation, endless accumulation kicks in, it doesn't really stop until citizens organize, go out on the street, take over, and stop it. And that continues to this day. And so the people that are supposed to instill peace worldwide are now voting to maintain the conflict because that's their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Andy Smolski in the house here. You're tuned to the Open Journal on Pacifica Radio. We're 14 minutes in front of 9 o'clock already, and we welcome you on this Monday of the final week of 2015, December the 28th. Wow. We're going to step outside the cube for a very brief traffic and weather update. We know that it's chilly and it's sunny and it's beautiful, and it's also light traffic. Just confirming that with Patrick. We'll be back in half a minute. Stay with us.
Well, actually, that's the next report. On the loop counterclockwise at the north, there's a crash in the left and center lanes. Down on the surface street, there's an accident just south of the North Freeway on Airline. Another accident report over on Beamer and Hughes Road, and I hope everybody's okay in all those. 43 degrees. If I missed anything bad about the heat, I'm sorry. Can it please come back now? Today all we get is 55 Fahrenheit. Touch warmer tomorrow and cloudier. Next chance of rain set for overnight Tuesday, early Wednesday morning. Moisture 50% likely. Another 50% chance of rain later this week. So, as we make the most of the closing days remaining in this epic, we now continue with KPFT's Open Journal.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. 13 in front of 9. You're tuned to Pacifica Radio in Houston, the mighty 90, listener-sponsored and commercial-free since 1970, now 100,000 watts strong, thanks to your investment in the People's Radio Station. And we welcome you aboard the Open Journal. I'm Dwayne Bradley.
I'm Marlo Blue, and we're here with Andy Smolski. Okay, Andy, let's bring it back home. How does the NRA function to ideologically support U.S. imperialism based on U.S. control of the arms trade?
I think to understand the NRA, we have to take a historical look at it. I mean, a lot of the times we just talk about it contemporarily. The NRA comes out of Union generals post-Civil War wanting to make sure that citizens knew how to fire a rifle. So if a civil war breaks out or we have to defend ourselves, that's where it's going to happen. It operates basically as a quasi-state entity. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt gave them guns during his time as president. So if we think, okay, well, what's the ideology of someone like Teddy Roosevelt, or what's the ideology of America in general at its root core, at least for the dominant power structure? Well, that's an ideology of white, right-wing, hyper-masculine, ultra-nationalist culture built on a history of settler colonialism. When you're expanding across the West, it's not open land, right? No, I mean, there are literal civilizations that existed there that we exterminated. So the NRA is based within this, and that continues to today. If you take survey data, there's the book escapes me the name of it at the moment, but if callers want, they can call y'all and I will get the information for them. But showing the survey data of the NRA, massive support for the military, massive support for the police. So embedded within it is this idea that U.S. imperialism is good, and that's also why think about the major recipients of donations from the NRA. Senator Cornyn from Texas, Einhoff from Oklahoma, worked very hard to block the arms trade treaty, which would have given at least a semblance of an idea that we can not sell arms to these dictatorial regimes or into conflict regions. Blocked it. Well, what do they also usually typically vote for? Pork barrel defense contracts. Like crazy. Cornyn's one of the number one people also getting money from the defense industry. And the NRA is highly involved in this and itself getting tons and tons of its funding, the majority of its funding from the small arms industry, from Beretta USA, Freedom Group, Smith & Wesson, Colts Manufacturing Company, and Glock. Some of these companies aren't even U.S. companies. No. I mean, these are foreign companies that are putting their money into our elections and then attempting to sway the populace for their advantage and to our disadvantage.
Okay, let's take it back around. What can we do?
I think, first and foremost, broaden the debate. Don't allow the debate to remain in this idea of, oh, they're going to take our guns. No, start to understand guns as a principal technology of oppression. So that's one, broaden the debate. Two, begin to organize. And not necessarily just on this topic. U.S. imperialism, capitalism, these are large ideological and political economies. Takes time. So organize to open up cooperatives that start to have not just a business function, but a political function of mandating this idea of solidarity. Because if you want people to not think that they need a gun, they have to stop being afraid. It's fear that drives that, and an understandable fear. It's not like the world is this great place at the moment. So you have to get people to develop solidarity, which means developing organizational structures that allow them to communicate with each other, to organize with each other, and to begin to envision and march towards utopia. How do you do that? Some things like a couple days ago, Tanny Lowe, who picked the song today, and we went down to Food Not Bombs. You did a food share. Okay, that's a moment of a brief joy right there. That's what's demonstrating what the possibilities can be. So I think that that's the key place to be at. Just attempting. They might fail, but experimenting and attempting this idea that if I begin to talk to my neighbor, hey, we're being treated wrongly. We're being, sold up a river by these corrupt politicians working for these corrupt industries. What can we do about it? Organize a third party. The Green Party's still there. Even attempting to push forward Bernie Sanders might be a decent idea, with the understanding that he fought for the F-35 to be built in Vermont, right, which wasted $1 trillion. But those are brief glimpses of hope, brief possibilities that if we kick open that door by organizing, by talking to each other, by going to Food Not Bombs, by going to a Green Party meeting, that can be kicked open, can slowly give us space to breathe once more. We've seen it before. 68 was this crowning moment, right? Mm-hmm. The door was kicked open and there was a brief moment of liberation. We've seen it before with the New Deal. Okay, let's get back there.
And you've got an upcoming article for Counterpunch specifically about this. When is that going to be coming out?
The article will be coming out in the January issue. Counterpunch is a ragtag team, so there's never really a set date of when it will be published.
Somehow that makes me feel better.
Yeah. Well, that if you don't have capital,
yeah, right.
You do what you can, and that's another thing is people have to begin to realize that if they want these alternatives, they won't always be polished, but they'll be beautiful because they're rough. So it'll be coming out in January, and get a subscription to Counterpunch, and make sure also that you donate to KPFT. These are other ways that people can develop alternatives. You don't like the corporate media, don't complain about it. Go somewhere else and support them for real. You don't like hearing advertisers? I hate hearing advertisers. Well, you don't have to if you go to KPFT. You don't have to see one in Counterpunch magazine. The only thing that Counterpunch ever advertises are books, which we should read more.
We should. And I like that description of Counterpunch. It applies to KPFT as well. The beautiful because it's rough kind of aspect. KPFT, a ragtag radio station powered by the people for 45, almost 46 years now. Preposterous. And yet we still pursue peace, as idealistic and utopian as most people would say that is, as foolish as many people think that is. Yet it is extremely real, and it's potent, and it's something that powers this radio station. And we appreciate you expounding on this. And we're down to the last minute, and I don't know if you can do this. If I read you the Second Amendment, and you were in the elevator with me, and I was somebody else, and you had to explain why this doesn't mean
Elevator
what
pitch.
so many
Elevator
people
pitch.
think. Okay, the Second Amendment, quote, a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed, period. Okay, so how dare you say that, my small arms are, I'm limited to 3. I need a lot more. So what can you tell me there, Andy? I've got 8 floors. We're going up an 8-story building.
Sir, I've always felt that the question is a matter of if we want peace, how do we arrive there? Will we arrive at peace through the barrel of a gun? Will the master's tools give us that ability? I don't think so. I think the question you should ask is, if you want to feel safe, shouldn't you want to enjoy the time with your neighbor? If you want to feel safe, do you think it's going to come because you have a well-organized militia every Saturday you're out there doing a training exercise, or because you with your fellow citizens began to topple those power structures that want to destroy and oppress? Those treadmills of destruction. Do you want to support treadmills of destruction, or do you want to begin to ask yourself, hey, maybe I can take that metal and turn it into something a little bit shinier and nicer. Maybe I can take that time, that manpower, that labor, and turn it into food, turn it into clothes, turn it into housing for all. I don't know if it's always a good elevator pitch. I don't think it'll get to everybody.
Right.
But I think it'll get to the right people, the ones who are afraid but want a way out, and that way out not being violence.
Andy Smolski will continue the conversation on another elevator trip in the near future, I hope. Thank you for being here.
Come home. Leave those Tar Heels alone. Come home.
Oh, man, I will. I'll be back soon.
All right. Hey, you've been listening to Open Journal. We do have to leave it there. Join us on social media. Thanks for listening. I'm Marlo Blue. Thanks to Haley Van Bagel, Christy Moffat, and our engineer Patrick for working on today's program. You can hear the show again or find links or guests or topics you've heard at kpft.org. I'm Marlo Blue. Thanks.
All right, I'm Dwayne Bradley, and we invite you to stick around at the end of this hour. Of course, at 9, we bring you Economic Update with Professor Richard Wolff. It follows the Bird Note, which concludes each and every Open Journal hour, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. here on the People's Radio Station, Pacifica, the Mighty 90. Today, Professor Wolff discusses a comparison between old socialism and new socialism, between government intervention and democratically run business. But for now, we leave you with a thought for the day, and it comes to us from Oscar Romero, who said, "Peace is not the product of terror or fear. Peace is the generous, tranquil contribution of all to the good of all. Peace is dynamism and generosity. It is humanity." Take care of each other.